When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning into episode 14 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snelling's Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Now, back when I first started Snelling's Law, I knew the type of firm that I wanted to build. I knew what we'd focus on, and I knew that I had grown tremendously over the years as a personal injury attorney. But I also knew that there was a ton I didn't know about running a successful business. So I started learning. And fortunately, one of the very first books that I read was Traction by Gino Wickman. This book taught me all about the entrepreneurial operating system, or as we affectionately call it, EOS. And it taught me a great framework on how to run a business, but the hard part was actually getting it implemented. Over the years that we ran Snelling's Law, we tried to do bits and pieces. We tried to get in there and work it certain ways. And then eventually I came to the realization, which I think I knew all along, and that I needed to hire a professional to help us get it implemented. So we did that, and I can tell you that it has made 100% a huge, huge difference in our firm. So that being said, today we are going to be talking to our Snelling's Law's EOS implementer, Curtis Rippee. Curtis, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's give everybody a little bit of frame of reference. Where'd you grow up, and how did you, where'd you go to high school, college, all those good things?
Yeah, I'm a Missouri kid, so I grew up in south central Missouri. My dad was a teacher, so we lived in several small towns. Ultimately went to Mizzou, the University of Missouri, for college, and so I spent my first 22 years in Missouri, but graduated, and my dad went to the University of Arkansas, and would come to Dallas whenever Arkansas would play in the Cotton Bowl. He's like, you should think about Texas. I'm like, all right. He goes, the people are great in Texas, and the weather's awesome. So I don't think he ever thought I'd really do it, but when I went through interviews for public accounting firms, I'm like, they go, where do you want to go? I want to go to Dallas. And I'm like, all right. So through some great circumstances and some divine intervention, I wound up in Dallas, and that was 33 years ago. And I guess I'm one of those people who says I wasn't born here, but I got here as quick as I could.
We heard that in the last podcast, I believe, and also from somebody from a cold state.
Yes, weather's better here.
Anytime I hear of someone from the Midwest, the Northeast is cold. Yeah. It's absolutely cold. But the Midwest, y'all don't have anything blocking the wind. And a cold wind is worse than any super cold day in my book.
Amen. Wind is the killer. Wind is the killer. But yeah, so I played golf, and so I knew that I was always happier in spring and summer. Like, I'll go somewhere where it's warmer more often. And so I thought that's the case. I'll have a better attitude and be cheerier more times the year. So that's how, that wasn't the real reason. It was certainly a benefit, but I was very fortunate, and I've loved every minute of it. I've married a Texan, now have 3 Texan daughters, so I'm firmly anchored here in Texas.
There you go. You have officially established your visa as a Texan.
I am. Yeah, so I'm here and love it, and just the people are great. And just people in Texas. One thing I loved about Texas when I first came, I did my interviews, I used to always laugh. I would stay at the Adolphus Hotel downtown, and I would call the lady who'd tell the weather every night just to hear a Texas accent. And one of the things I loved about Texas, Texans have a pride like no other state. It's like
many would say an unreasonable pride.
Some would say that. Yes, I tease my wife sometimes about that, but I just always appreciated just. People in Texas are proud they're from Texas, and I love that. I love being a part of something that's bigger than me, and so that was a special part that when I came to Texas, I'm like, yeah, they have Texas pride, and so I love that piece. So I'm hooked. I'm a Texan.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you have an accounting background. You worked for accounting firms. How did you end up in accounting? Is that something you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Awesome question. Yeah, because many would say with my personality, I don't fit the typical CPA
You do not.
framework. No, my mom had actually got an accounting degree late in life, and so I was like, oh, that seemed to be a real versatile degree, and I was a math guy, and so I thought, oh, that's a versatile degree that I can do a lot of things. So to me, when I did the accounting thing, I did it more from a perspective of it was something that I had a lot of options, and so being naturally a guy who liked numbers, it seemed to be a great way. I could go a lot of different directions with that, and then when I was successful enough to be able to get a Big Four accounting firm offer, that was even better. And so, yeah, so I have accounting in my blood, but probably if you take my behavior profile, it may not fit that necessarily.
So it's interesting. You said one of the main reasons you picked accounting is because of all the different options that it offered.
Yep.
And so have you always been kind of had that personality profile of I want to not limit myself as much as possible. I want to keep as many options open as possible, or is it just more career oriented where you're that way?
You're reading my profile, and yeah, that's exactly who I am.
Okay.
I was the one when I went to the Big Four accounting firm. I actually had a bunch of different clients in a bunch of different industries because I didn't want to limit myself. That was I didn't want to be limited. And so if you follow my career path, you'll notice a wide and varied industry because I like keeping my options open. I like variety. I like learning. To me, learning is my favorite thing to do in life. I love to learn, and so I'm able to learn in those different aspects. So yeah, that you read my profile, you didn't even know it. Yes, I'm one of those that likes to keep options open because you never know what the next path could take.
Interesting. All right. And so you go and you eventually pick one of the Big Four accounting firms.
Yep.
Which one did you pick?
It was Coopers and Lybrand at the time. Now it's known as PricewaterhouseCoopers, but yeah, it was Coopers.
All right. And how long did you work at the big accounting firm?
5 years and 1 day. Because
very specific.
At 5 years, your pension vests, and so it was the time it worked out that I actually was wanting to leave. But yeah, I stayed 5 years and 1 day. It was a great time. I got a tremendous amount of experience. It was so good. I learned, got to travel a bunch, and so would not trade. I used to say it's an MBA that you get paid for, and so it was a great experience. I was ready to be done at 5 years, but yeah, 5 years and 1 day.
So you did your accounting residency, and you got paid
well
for
said.
it.
Yes,
There you
well
go.
stated. Yes, I love it.
Well, the same thing out of law school. I don't know how CPA is. I assume you probably have a little bit more hands-on experience as a CPA, going through school and going and getting all your certifications. But out of law school, you know just enough to be dangerous, right? You know more about the law at that point in time, varied aspects of it. You got to pass the bar exam, which tests all different kinds of knowledge. But in terms of actual practice, you really don't know what you're doing.
Nothing, yeah.
And so those people who go and start their own law firm straight out of law school, my hat's off to you because you have a whole lot of figuring out to do.
Right.
And so I kind of did the same thing. I was at a bigger firm for the first 4 years of my career before we decided to split off and go start our own thing. What was it that you didn't like? Why were you ready to get out of there at year 5?
Yeah, so it's a very specific story. When I had moved into litigation services, ironically. We had a division that did expert witness testimony, and we did litigation support. And so the last 3 years, I did lit support and loved it. Traveled a lot. And so what I struggled with was, you know how litigation goes. It's like all of a sudden, we have to have all this information by Friday at 5, and so there's a certain amount of lack of control that I had in my career. And I always tell the story. My brother was younger than me, had a spring break from college. He was coming down to spend the week with me for spring break, and they called me in the Friday before and said, "Hey, you're going to New Orleans next week." And
Did you take him with you?
No, I shouldn't. And I'm like, my brother's coming for spring break. And they go, well, maybe you hurry and get done. You can get done and come home by Thursday. And that was kind of the last. I traveled a bunch, and which I enjoyed, but at some point I wanted to be home. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin. It said, okay, it's time for me to go. So it was a matter of, I loved it, but I wanted to control my own. I used to joke that, yeah, I could travel because I was single, wasn't dating anybody. And I'm like, yeah, but if I travel all the time, I will always be single. And so I was ready to kind of get a more settled lifestyle. Wouldn't trade that time for anything, but it was really in that the consultative piece I loved, but in the world of litigation, there's so much that you just don't know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. You can only plan so much. And I was like, yeah, that was not something that I wanted to do long term. And so I, decided it was time to move on.
So not really on topic here, but did you ever testify as an expert?
I got subpoenaed one time. I was a young guy, and so I got actually a subpoena one time. I still have that subpoena with the dollar, and but I never ended up having to testify. But always was ready. Would have loved to, trained to, and that was always kind of my dream. Whenever I had the opportunity to go, I'm like, oh, I'd love to be an expert witness. I think that would be great. And maybe that's naive on my part, but
well, it's great given your direct examination. It's on cross where people tend to not enjoy it quite so much.
I learned all the what time is it, or do you have the time? Yes, I have the time. All those tricks about don't give more information than you're asked. And
yes,
and that's a game to me. That's kind of like it's almost it's a performance element. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, being on and having to perform that part I would have loved and enjoyed in the context of even in my current role, being asked a question. I like that piece of that dynamic interchange and being able to think through and, okay, how do I best communicate this in a way that's short and that's effective? I really enjoy that piece a lot. So I would have enjoyed that, I think. You're right, maybe not the cross piece, but I do think that part it's interesting, right? It's interaction that's entertaining.
Absolutely. So tell me this. You hit year 5, you're ready to be done with that. Mm-hmm. What's your thought process going into your next move?
Yeah, so I was ready to go into an industry. I was like, I'm ready to go where I can settle down, make an impact on one organization for a long period of time. And so Baylor Healthcare System, I had some great relationships over there, and they were looking for a senior financial analyst. And so great hospital system, nonprofit, well-respected around the world, and it was a great opportunity. So I was looking for someplace I could go settle and have a long-term impact. It's like in consulting, and in the Big Four world, you're dealing with a lot of clients, but I wanted to go plant myself in an organization so I could have a longer-term impact. So that was kind of the big. I was looking for that, and I wanted to go work for a well-respected organization. So Baylor gave me the opportunity, and so that was great. So I spent about 4 years there as well.
All right, to get into your lingo, at that point in time when you took that job with Baylor, did you have a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan of where you wanted your career to go?
No. I thought I was bigger and better and smarter than I really was. I mean, I never forget I was at Baylor one time, and I got called, and I'm probably 7 years into my career probably, and so we're looking for a CFO, if you know anybody. I'm like, well, about me? And I was like, I'm 7 years in my career. I just, you think you're big stuff, and and so I'm like, and I look back now and go, I was so naive about what I thought I knew. And so I didn't. I just, I was kind of, which is not going to surprise you because of the EOS implementer piece. I love making things better. It's just what drives me. And in fact, my wife says, I don't need you. The joke in our house is, she says, I don't need you to make me better. I don't need you to improve me. Because I'll say, why don't you do this a little bit? Why don't you do it this way? She goes, I don't need your help. And so anyways, I just love
We may have had that conversation at my house before too.
Yeah. When your brain works that way, it's just like, hey, this is good. How do we make it better? And that's what I loved about the EOS process and what I love about what I do now. So there's always been this natural inclination within me to help make things better, and then to be able to impact lives is even really what motivates me at the deepest core. But so that's kind of how I didn't really have a tenure. I didn't have this. I want to be at this place at a certain time. I just wanted to be. I wanted to be successful, provide for a family, and then to enjoy what I do.
At what point in time? Well, let me ask you this first. How long were you at Baylor?
4 years.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so pretty short stint.
Yeah.
How long? At what point did you start your own business?
Yeah, so interesting. I left Baylor to go to a high-tech startup in 1998. Is when everybody was doing high-tech startups to get rich. And
it worked for a while.
Worked for a while and didn't work for me. We were doing a high-tech startup. I had a buddy starting a high-tech startup company, and he said, why don't you come be our CFO? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go get the brass ring. I'm going to get rich. And about 8 months later, that company closed, and we didn't get rich. But what I did find is I was like, wow, this entrepreneurship thing is great. I like it. Started a company, formed it, built it up, and I'm like, that was a lot of fun. And that's what stroked I never grew up thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur. That was never. I would have said I was probably a system guy. Let me work inside the context of a team, and let me just tell me what to do, and I'll be, And I was like, oh, I kind of like this starting a company thing. So that put the kind of the thought in my head that someday I wanted to start my own company on my own. And I kind of had this. I felt like God was telling me, start a company, employ people in the community, maybe multiple generations, and provide a place where it's people are spending many times more hours awake at the office than they are at home. Provide a place where people want to come to work, where they can have a good experience. So that kind of always drove me. Is I want to start a company, but mostly to provide a great place to work for others. And so I kind of started. So I ended up helping start 4 different companies, and loved it.
Was the first one that you started directly after the high-tech company, or did you go somewhere else first?
I went somewhere else first. So when I went to Monarch Dental, which is here in Dallas, was a publicly traded company, and went to be their chief accounting officer. And so I went there, kind of went back into the corporate environment, say I just we were about to have our first baby, and so I went back and got, a more secure
insurance,
paycheck, all those things, and yet learned another element of business that was good, was helpful for me. And then went and worked for a real estate development firm that we started kind of, that we did start. We kind of rolled it out of another company and started it. And that was that was kind of the last step where I went, yeah, I'm ready to do my own thing. I joined a group to do a high-tech startup, and then I started a company with, both of those were with seasoned professionals. And I kind of look back at my career, and I kind of worked into entrepreneurship slowly to where I got almost kind of a little bit, I got training wheels or whatever along the way. And then in 2003, I was like, I'm ready to do my own thing. I'd worked for a publicly traded company, didn't want to do that anymore. Sarbanes-Oxley came in, I'm like, I'm out, right? And then I worked for a privately held company, family held, that my name wasn't the same as the family name.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, I want to be the family name, right? I want to start. And so I started in 2003, I started a fractional CFO services business. And so that was my true, just me, solo starting my first thing. And it was great.
So you went about it incredibly differently than most. I assume you would agree with this, seeing that you work with entrepreneurs now.
Yeah.
Most people tend to jump into their first entrepreneur experience with 0 training wheels.
Right.
They jump off the cliff and, hope that there's water down there to land in, and then try not to drown.
Yeah.
Right? So if you had it to do all over again, well, let me back up and ask it this way. Is it better, in your opinion, to try to go in slowly with those training wheels, or would you recommend, no, take that flying leap, learn as you go, or does it completely depend on the person's personalities and skill set?
Yeah, the latter. It's who. It's who you are. For me, I was never that giant risk taker. Right, I was not the person who was the first in the pool, the first to. I was always like, let's see how everybody works for everybody else before I did it. So my natural tendency is not to be that jump out first. But there are people who are, right? And I'll tell you, there's a common characteristic on many of the entrepreneurs I work with that are founders. They are the person that just jumped out and said they have incredible self-belief and incredible tenacity to not fail. And so it's interesting to watch, not everybody, some are like me, some, had the experience and they kind of jumped out later, they're more risk averse. I think entrepreneurs come in all different shapes and sizes. I think, we call them the visionaries in EOS. They're the people like, I know this is going to work and I'm not going to stop until it works. And the tenacity and their just grit is inspiring to me. Now that gets them in trouble sometimes, right? Because they think they're the only ones in the world that they're the smartest person in the room, and a lot of times are, but they don't know everything. Or sometimes they reinsert themselves at times, whenever something struggles, because they have, they can kind of have a Superman complex or Superwoman complex, whatever. And so, but yeah, I think it's different for everybody. For me, as I said, I never dreamed to be an entrepreneur. And so it's something I kind of worked my way into over time. But I would say for most entrepreneurs, that is that's the norm, not the norm.
Well, but if you're listening to different entrepreneurial podcasts or reading entrepreneurial books, you don't really hear about the other side of becoming an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Most of it is, hey, quit your job, get started, and make things happen. There's not this training wheels approach to becoming an entrepreneur. And so if somebody who's listening to this is risk averse,
yep.
Maybe it's because of, hey, they got to support a family, they can't do without a paycheck, or for whatever reason, they're just scared to do it. Mm-hmm. I think everybody should be scared if you're going to be doing this, or else there's something wrong with you. You need to reevaluate your decision if you're not scared at all.
I misplayed that little bit of mine. I'll have to tell you about that.
Yeah. And so what is a solid pathway that you think would be helpful for people to at least think through if they're in that boat where they can't just jump off that cliff, but they really want to go do it? They have a great idea, but they need those training wheels to launch.
Yeah, I think I look back on my past, and you seem to find these people in their 20s who, if they're wired to be entrepreneurs, they're jumping off at maybe 19, 21, 23, 25, just jumping off and doing it. And that's your hardcore entrepreneur who are like, I've been bred, this is the way I'm doing it. The other folks, I think, to me, it was it's that early 30s, kind of where you've spent a decade learning. You can't wait too long, because at some point, I think our brains kind of change, and where, I'm 55 now, and I don't know that I'd want to go start something from the scratch, just because, the amount of mental energy and tenacity it takes, it's a young person's game to some degree. But if you're in your 30s and you've got a decade plus of experience, still have that energy level, and want to create something that's your own, I always tell people it's the greatest experience you'll ever have. The highs are higher, the lows are lower. Everybody told me, well, you're going to go through a struggle. And I'm like, not me. I'm smarter than most, right? So I'm not going to struggle. I'm going to start off, be up and to the right all the way, and, naive. And I've learned, and now as we teach in EOS, everybody hits a ceiling, right? You hit a ceiling, whether it's ability, money, capacity, staffing, whatever. And I did, and I had this situation where I went a year without a salary. And in fact, the funny story I always tell is like it was after the recession. The recession impacted our business, and I'd gone a year without a salary, and obviously stressful. And our kids don't need to know all those financial struggles. And my girl's in grade school, and she looked at me and she goes, everybody talks about this recession, how it's impacted everybody. She didn't impact us at all. Well, we protected you well, right? And so later on, she got to be 16 or 17. I told her, but we went a year, and that was I'll never forget that time. I'll never forget the time whenever I'm driving along, going, I had kind of played all my cards and didn't know what was left. And it was a time of prayer, going, I don't know what to do next. And I never thought I'd get there, but I did, and it was such a learning experience. I look back, and it was such a time where God totally took care of me. And, let me get to that point where like, oh, wow, this is not about me. I can't do this on my own. And I think if you're not just a born and bred entrepreneur, but like to do something 10 years into your career, plus or minus, I think you've got some good experience. You've got good relationships, you've got a good network. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, it's okay. You can go back. And you'll be better in the corporate environment, because you'll have a whole better appreciation for the owners of the business, going, wow, okay, yeah, if somebody doesn't get paid, it's you, the owner. And I'll collect those invoices now with more tenacity, because I know what that means in terms of cash flow. I think everybody would benefit from a little venture through entrepreneurship. I know not everybody's wired for it. I've had plenty of people in my life like, I just never want to take that risk. And that's great, right? It's just never, but there is another path, is your point, but I think it's a early 30s, 10 years into your career experience path, maybe.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned you never learn more about yourself than when you start a business. We talked about that on our last episode with James Whalen. And that is so true. When you don't have anyone else that you can blame, you all of your the things that you're good at and the things that aren't become very, very apparent, especially the things that you're not good at.
Yep.
And where you thought that you were Superman, you quickly realize that you were in a world of kryptonite.
Yep.
And you need help. And so one of the things that we were talking about in the last episode as well is kind of the multi-phase level of owning a business, right? So when you take that first leap of faith or you jump in the water, you're trying not to drown. And you are everything. You are chief marketer, you're chief accounting, you're chief business development, you're chief operations, and you're the one doing the stuff. Some people can start off with people helping them, others can't. And eventually, if you succeed, then you're kind of treading water. And life can be pretty miserable because you're doing everything. You have zero time. And I think that's where a lot of the businesses wash out is people just can't do it anymore.
Yep.
And that goes to the grit aspect that you were talking about and the tenacity of willing this thing to succeed. But at some point, you can only will it to succeed so far, given that there's only 24 hours in a day and you can't work all of them. And so there's another phase. Some people find it and some people don't. And I think that's where you truly come in, and your current job as an EOS implementer is helping people get from that first phase. And maybe they have some staff. Maybe they are doing more than treading water. Maybe they're doing fine. Maybe they're even bringing in six figures and living a good life. But they could be doing so much more. And so for those that are in that boat, those that want to grow something to be great, to really capitalize on their business, what is that next step? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's one of those things you can't know everything.
Right.
And you can't have experienced everything. And I use the example a lot of times where if you want to learn how to play golf, you can go over to Shields, you can go to any other store, and you can, Academy, PGA Superstore, and you can buy clubs. And you can go to YouTube, and you can watch some golf videos, and you can go to the range, and you can go to the golf course, and you can enjoy the game of golf. But if you want to be good, if you want to go to the next level, you probably need to hire and invest in a swing coach or somebody to watch from the outside, somebody who lives it every day, who somebody can see from the outside, who can see what you can't see, know what you don't know. And entrepreneurship's kind of that way, right? Depending on your background, you may have had exposure to some good operating infrastructure, operating systems. You may not have. And whenever you get to a certain size, we say that, complexity just infiltrates the organization really quickly. We always say if you have two people in the organization, there's two ways of communication. If there's three, you add a person, now there's 6 ways of communication and only 3 people. If you add a fourth person, there's 12 ways of communication, and it's like complexity comes quickly. How do you manage that? And without an operating system that everybody understands, buys into, and uses, you're going to struggle. You're going to hit some ceilings, and you're going to be stuck. And so that's one of the things that I love about EOS is EOS provides the framework, as we say, a complete system of simple tools and concepts to help everybody in the organization be rowing in the same direction. Because inevitably, when you got multiple people in the organization, everybody has a different idea what success is. Everybody has a different idea where you're going. And until you align those people and you have a common understanding about how we're going to do things, you may succeed just out of pure tenacity. You will, but it's so much easier if you're able to have a structure by which you operate, and then have somebody we would say from the outside who can go, hey, you may not see this, but here's something you need to think about. And it's like having somebody, look at your golf swing and go, oh, if I just change the way my hand is positioned, or if I change this, wow, that makes a dramatic difference. Your growth can be dramatically faster and more efficient and more profitable and more fun, right? That's the part about entrepreneurship that gets lost sometimes, is that you work so hard, it's like you forget, you're supposed to enjoy what you do. And,
Right.
and so if you're working so hard at just trying to survive, you forget, why am I doing this? I'm beating my head against the wall for what reason? And so many times an operating structure like EOS and having a coach from the outside like an implementer can help you have more fun, right? Get what you want from the business. We say EOS helps entrepreneurs get more of what they want from their business. And that's just an idea that, you can fight through on your own, but it's going to be a lot harder road to take than if you engage a system and have somebody help you.
And so I think one of the things that has helped us to grow and just become better all around at everything that we do is almost a three-prong approach. I have a coach, I have a business coach.
Yep.
I'm in a mastermind group, and we're looking at other mastermind groups for other people on our leadership team as well. And through those two things, those are outside perspectives, right? Those are with the coach. He's coached people through our various situations before and to the next level. With the mastermind group, the group I'm in, I'm the smallest fish in the pond, and so I get to surround myself with these law firm owners from all over the United States who have, for the most part, faced every problem I'm facing, already screwed up the solutions and found the right solution, so I don't have to go through that. And we get to brainstorm on newer ideas. And if I come to that group with an idea, we can brainstorm it, and I guarantee you I'm going to come out with at least more ideas to come up with a better solution for the idea or better implementation for it. Yeah. And then third, the third biggest thing has been implementing EOS in our business. And we've been in, maybe 6 months now, 5 months, working with you. But it's a completely different aspect of the business. It is the operating system, as you referred to it. And so take us through the basic tenets of, operating system, great. Is this like an Asana? Is this a case management system? What do operating system mean?
Yeah, it's not technology, right? It's the best way to describe EOS is a complete set of simple tools and concepts to help you get more of what you want from your business. And we do that by helping you become strong in 6 key components of your business. We say an entrepreneur is juggling 136 different items at any given time, at least, right? And we figure if you can strengthen just 6 key components, all those 136 items fall into place. And those 6 items are, one is vision. You got to make sure that everybody in your organization is 100% on the same page with where you're going, how you're going to get there. It's always shocking. So if you ask everybody in the organization before they implement EOS, what's our long-term vision? You get however many people in the organization, you get that many answers. And the owners, we're on the same page. I'm like, oh, really? Let's ask, right? And so making sure everybody's 100% on the same page, where you're going, how you're going to get there. 2, you can't have a great vision without great people, right? So you have to make sure you have the right people. Jim Collins made right people in the right seats on the bus famous, but you got to make sure you have the right people that fit your organization. Right people for you is different than right people for any other organization. You have a unique set of characteristics which define your right people. And then we got to make sure we're in the right seat, that they're good at their jobs. And so when you have a right vision, you have good people, right, great people, then it's like you got to make sure you're looking at the right data. I used to say in my fractional CFO services business, most organizations are run by feel and intuition. Well, I think this is a good idea. We should try this rather than hard objective data. And so our data component is making sure you're looking at the right objective data that tells you how the organization's operating. Once you have those 3, then you become very lucid and very clear, and all the problems, obstacles, barriers, things that are slowing you down, taking you off, keeping you from what you want are called issues. And so we give you a pathway to identify those issues, put them on a list, and solve them. We have an issue solving track that make them, tee them up, make them go away forever. Then we have a process component. We got to make sure the organization operates the same way all the time. And we have a handful of core processes that we want to make sure they're done the same way every time, so you can be more efficient, effective, and make the business more fun to operate. The last piece is traction, which the rubber meets the road. It's around instilling discipline and accountability in your organization. And we take you through a process by establishing what are your rocks for the next 90 days, your priorities for the next 90 days, and have you on a meeting cadence so that you can meet together, make sure you're talking about the right things. And so, so if you can strengthen those 6 key components, you're well on your way to having a successful business.
And to me, given my experience and having read the book, if you had to boil EOS down to one word, it would be communication. You're communicating your vision.
Absolutely.
You're communicating the issues. You're communicating to solve those issues. You're communicating, hey, here's the systems that we're using.
Yep.
We're communicating on, all right, what are we looking for in an employee to fill this seat so that we are all on the same page as to whether or not that employee is doing the right thing. And we're forced to communicate data.
Yep.
And to your point, early on, I was making decisions based on feel.
Sure.
Right?
We all do, right?
Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this person. We probably shouldn't take their case,
Right.
or any number of things. Yeah, I think we're good in the bank account to make this hire or to do this marketing campaign. And it sounds silly, but it is amazing how many businesses operate that way. Out of the people that come to you, and you'll do a free 90-minute presentation
Yep.
for anybody that comes to you, and so not everyone decides that they want to move forward. It's not a cheap process by any means.
Nope.
But it is an investment.
Sure it is.
Out of the ones that you speak to, how many operate, as best you can tell, just based off their gut, not really even based on data?
Boy, you're talking, you're at 80, 90%. We say that in EOS, we're trying to get you 80% strong in those 6 key components. Most organizations, we say, operate 20% strong in those 6 key components. Just because you'll have entrepreneurs who may have a financial or analytical bent, and they'll lean towards data and sometimes they can get too much data. And so it's the personality around your entrepreneur, but very few organizations are coming that are really operating on a concrete, objective basis. Because there's so much going on. They've got so many balls they're juggling. It's just hard to wrap your head around everything until we talk about simplifying. Until you simplify it, it can be real complex. And so I would say the majority of the businesses that walk through my doors are like they're just trying to survive. And they're succeeding in spite of themselves many times. But not many are operating on hard data.
One of the other things that I know our team has been 100% on board with and loves, and is probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest drivers of the increased success, has been the weekly L10 meeting. And that is a forced time once a week for 90 minutes to sit down and go through a very specific meeting flow. But what it does is it forces us to talk about the business. It forces us to talk about people. It forces us to talk about data. It forces us to talk about what's going right, what's going wrong. And it forces us to look at the issues that we're having, not a specific issue on a case, not a specific issue with a client or whatnot, but actual business issues. This system isn't working. This marketing isn't working. Hey, we have this idea, and I cannot even begin to tell you, although I guess we could look it up because we get a printout of all the issues that we solved, how many problems we've solved simply because we actually took the time. We have a 4-person leadership team, for all 4 of us to sit down undistracted and talk through an issue. And that issue may last the entire 60 minutes that we have allotted to that section of the meeting, or we may solve 15 issues because they're smaller, but they've been sitting there forever, and then all of a sudden, with those 15 things solved, they're off our plate. We don't have to think about them anymore. And so just that forced time of sitting down and communicating and thinking about the business instead of just operating, pants on fire throughout the day and throughout the week, to me, I think that is the biggest opportunity for business owners to really understand, hey, wow, there's a whole lot more issues here than I actually realized.
It's funny you say that because whenever clients start working with us, and usually their first few meetings, they come back and, like yours did, say the L10s. And so L10, for folks who don't know, so we call them a level 10 meeting, which means it's a weekly meeting with your leadership team that's same day, same time, same place, start on time, end on time, and it has a very specific structure. The structure is the same every single time. 2/3 of this 90-minute meeting, as you said, is dedicated to solving issues, making problems go away. And we use what IDS, we identify the real issue, we discuss it, and solve it. Most companies are great at discussing it.
Yes.
They discuss the heck out of an issue, and the next meeting, they discuss the heck out of it again. The next meeting, discuss it, and they go, we keep talking about this. What I love about the issue solving track is like, what's the real issue? Let's discuss it, and what's the solution? And we ask at the end of every, are you solved? Does that solve us, make it go away? And clients come back and go, I love the L10 meetings. Why is it? Because we're solving problems that we've had on our list forever, and now we're forced to come up with a solution to make it go away. And I would say that we say 82% of all issues within an organization are people. If I were to tell you what the most impactful piece, other than making sure you have right people, right seat, are those L10 meetings and those solving issues, because that is what drives change. And so, so I love it that that's what's happening, because it's amazing how many companies meet and they don't have this solution-based issue-solving process, and so the stuff just stays out there forever.
Well, and the interesting, too, thing that I think we're all finding is the natural tendency is to start off with the surface-level stuff, the easy stuff, because you get to click the solve button, and all of a sudden at the end of the meeting, whoa, we've solved 21 problems or issues, and it's great. Those are things that needed to be solved or talked about and solved, but it's the really big stuff. And as you kind of run out of the smaller things, you start to realize where the heavier issues are, where the things are that people don't really feel comfortable talking about. And as you go through this process, you develop this level of trust, because whenever you go through the initial meetings with an implementer, there's Kleenex in the room. Right? It is not an easy
We say
day.
It's not an EOS meeting until somebody cries.
Now you've just scared off anyone who was potentially thinking
That's
about
all right. Hey,
EOS.
listen, and a lot of times they're tears. Sometimes they're tears of joy. Sometimes they're tears of just relief. So it's not always tears of sadness or whatever, but it is an emotional process. Yeah. So
it truly is, and it's a great process to go through. And I think a lot of people steer away from it because it's the head in the sand thing, right? It's, well, I'm just going to take some of these concepts and implement them because we can do that, and that's easy. And so at a mastermind group, probably, a year ago, I had mentioned, I think I was having an employee issue or like a hiring issue or something like that, and somebody brought up well, where's your accountability chart? Where are you trying to fill in? Show us your accountability chart. And I was like, well, it's in my head. And everybody rolls their eyes and they say, I thought you were a traction guy. And I was like, well, I am. They're like, well, you suck at it, for one. And you're a moron because you can't do this on your own. You got to go hire an implementer. And I think there's one person in our group that is self-implemented, and he thinks it's going great. I think everybody else in the group is rolling their eyes saying, no, you're doing it wrong. But everybody in there was like, look, man, if you want to take it to the next level, hire an implementer. Hire an implementer. Talk to my guy, talk to this other guy, talk to somebody in your area. What is it that makes an implementer a must-have, in your opinion?
Yeah, no.
Or is an implementer a must-have?
Well, you don't have to, right? I self-implemented. I wish I would have hired.
How did that go for you?
Yeah, I wish I'd had an implementer, right? We almost lost the company twice because we weren't willing to have the tough conversations that an implementer would have forced, right? We talk about artificial harmony, and Patrick Lencioni in Five Dysfunctions of a Team talks about artificial harmony, and it's easy to have if you don't have a third party in the room asking tough questions, right? And so what an implementer does is we say we do three things. We teach you the tools. You can read the book and you can learn a lot, but we're in it every day. There's a depth of these tools that somebody who's self-implementing just can't have, because they're running the rest of their business. They can't have the depth of knowledge that an implementer has. So we teach the tools at a depth that is really rich. We facilitate you to a single answer. You've got a leadership team, and we got to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And so I think one of the most powerful things we do is help everybody get to the same answer. And that's a fun part for me. Yeah, I really enjoy making sure it's like, oh, and they go, oh, now that's it. That's what we're trying to say. And the third piece is we're a coach. Like I used the example of the swing coach before. I can see stuff you can't see. I deal with this every day. I can see deficiencies in something in terms of how you're doing stuff that you may not, or I can push you, or we call it implementers pressure test leadership teams by asking questions. And we say, one of the EOS healthy rules is be comfortable with the uncomfortable. We'll force the uncomfortableness sometimes. And so having a third party in the room creates a safety net sometimes. We're like, I'm more likely to say something to you as my boss if I know Curtis is going to protect me, or there's an implementer going, hey, listen, it's going to, or I know that Scott's going to respond better, knowing that there's a third party in the room. And just, it's like anything. It's like, you think about marriage counseling or anything, when you have a mediator or somebody third party in the room who can referee, even if there's not major conflict, it's productive, right? And where you're living together every day, a counselor or implementer can go, hey, how about this? You're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Or we have these little squishies in the room. We have an elephant in the room. Hey, the elephant in the room is we're not talking about this. An implementer can go, I think I smell an elephant in the room where we need to be talking about something. Or it's something. That's where I think it's just having the third party in the room who lives EOS every day and has seen hundreds of companies go through this. We've seen thousands of golf swings, to use the analogy, and we can recognize stuff that you just can't. And I tell people all the time, you can self-implement. That's the cheapest way to do it, right? Or you can hire an implementer. And I self-implemented. Our company doubled in size in 3 years, and we sold it for 4 years later for a multiple we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So you can do it. You don't have to hire an implementer. And it's not a cheap. And it costs money. The investment, I believe, is well worth it. But again, you don't have to.
For those who are considering EOS or some other kind of similar program, there's other ones out there. Sure. What have you seen makes the difference between a company who successfully implements EOS and one who doesn't? I'm sure you've had failed companies.
Yes, absolutely. Humility, number one. Humility of the visionary, the owner, the founder. The ability to say, I don't have all the answers. We have this saying, we talk about who we're looking for, who our ideal client is. Our ideal client is what we call a target market, someone with 10 to 250 employees, 2 to 50 million in revenue. We work with companies way outside those norms. But that is a very typical, with that the ownership is open to change, willing to be vulnerable, they're more scared of the status quo than they are of change. And if I can tell right away, if I've got an owner who basically thinks he knows everything or she knows everything, that's a red flag to me. Like, this is not going to work. And so I would. That is the single greatest. If I got an owner who's like, hey, we want to get better. Rock and roll, let's go. If not, then if I can sniff that out, I will tell them that I'm probably not the right implementer for them, or maybe EOS is not right. But you got to be willing to make. Because a lot of times I've had situations where boards have said, "Hey, I really want our company to go through," and the person leading the day-to-day wasn't that bought in. And so we did one session with one client, and I went back and I met the day-to-day leader for lunch. I said, "You're not bought in, are you?" And he's like, I don't think we really need this. I'm like, don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. If you change your mind, come see me. So it's a leader has some humility and understands that they don't have all the answers.
All right, we're almost out of time. One last question. Is there a specific type of business industry that EOS really works for, but not so much others? One of the most fascinating things for me of EOS, it's really agnostic. We say it's a human energy management system. If you have people in an organization, it works. I have clients who are churches. I have clients who are faith-based nonprofits. I have nonprofits. I have for-profit large organizations, service companies, manufacturer. It is really, anytime you have people working towards a single common goal, EOS is a system that can help you
be more successful in working towards that goal. So really, there is no industry that works better or worse with EOS. And that sounds like, we can do everything. It really is. We say there's no silver bullets or magic pills in EOS. And they're time tested. There's nothing new, right? They're
Right.
just time tested, good business principles that are put into a system that make it easy to execute.
And two, I think we need to emphasize that it's not the same for every single company.
No.
Your values look different. The way that your L10s run may be the same, but the way that the team focuses on different things is going to be different, and the types of issues are going to be different and whatnot. All right, you're a book guy. Give us your top 3 that you would recommend.
Oh, wow. You're asking the guy that to narrow it down to 3. Good to Great from a business perspective is just one, if you've not read it, it's just really a powerful book that talks about how to take a good company to a great company by Jim Collins, I think is really good. Number 2, Who Not How, by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Sometimes we try to figure out how to do things, and there's already people who know how to do it. You just got to find them and partner with them. That was a life-changing book for me as an EOS implementer. I started, I'm like, I had a lady that was been a dear friend for years, and I'm like, she's really good at stuff that I'm not. And so I went and asked her, hey, will you come work with me? And it's Tracy. Has come to work with my EOS practice, and she's done a phenomenal job. And so find your who, not your how, right? And know what your unique ability is, and find those around you that are better at doing those things that you're not. And the third part is, and also a Benjamin Hardy book, is The Gap in the Gain. And that's where sometimes we so focused on what the ideal is and how far we're away from the ideal, rather than looking back and go, how far have we come? And so I really, those are 3 books I throw out quite often, because you've made progress. Look backwards. Doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for the ideal, but look back. So Gap in the Gain and Who Not How by Benjamin Hardy, and then Jim Collins is Good to Great.
Yeah, if I had to recommend one book that I've read this year, it would be Gap in the Gain, and last year would be Who Not How.
Yeah, right.
So I'm right there with you on
Love
those
it.
2 for sure. So,
Yep.
Curtis, thank you so much. Where can people find you, either your website, social media, if they're interested in EOS implementation?
Yeah, so EOSworld.com, EOSworldwide.com/Curtis-Rippee.
RIPPEE.
RIPPE, or you can go to RIPPELLC.com. Easy for me to say. It's my own name, can't spell it. And then, so that's the 2 best ways from to track us down. Go to EOS Worldwide. You can go to EOSworldwide.com and search for Curtis Rippee, or just, there's a lot of great implementers out there besides me. We've got over 500 implementers across the world, and thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. It was a pleasure.
Me too.